everybody here to quickly imagine a picture you think of when you hear the word economics. I'll give everybody here about 2 seconds. Okay, most of you here probably think of something like this. And it's okay, because in fact, most people, when we hear the word economics, we tend to associate with other words like numbers, innovation, graphs, stock markets, or even a bunch of experts in suits and ties talking about inflation. Truthfully, I was like that too. I didn't really understand the fascination behind stocks. In fact, I really question people who actually find them interesting. For to me, they were just some jagged neon color lines going up and down differently every time. However, to my father, or my papa, it's something so much more. They're almost like a language. Some days I could see him skipping a few meals, getting so engrossed in these stocks. So as a kid, I would bring him some of my favorite snacks of the apples that my mom cut to him. That basically sums up my relationship with me, my papa, and stocks. And then one day, when I was 13 years old, I finally gathered enough courage to go up to my dad and ask him. I said, he's actually here today. Hi, Papa. So I asked him, what is it about these numbers that make you spend so much hours just looking at them? He paused for a second and said something I probably would never forget. Which basically translates to, they're not just numbers, they're stories. That moment, it kind of clicked for me. I started to realize that economics isn't just about calculations and graphs. It's about people just like us. The stories we're being influenced, the fear, the hopes we live among, and how all of that drives our decisions. So, and every fluctuation in the market is like a reflection, almost identical to a mirror of human behavior, hopes, fears, and all that we live with. But however, at the time, I couldn't really fully grasp what my dad was trying to say. But then I start to see it everywhere as I grow older. At first, I used to think that economics was just profit and loss, supply and demand, all these phrases you learn in your basic business class. And then I also start to notice how belief does play a role in economics. There's this one particular time I remember. It was actually pretty recent. Last year, in my sophomore year of high school, I took a history class. There, we were learning about the Great Depression. If you don't know what that is, it's one moment in history where almost the most devastating of the stock market crash. Later on, I had a winter break, and then I went back to my home country, Myanmar, to go visit my parents. Subsequently, a friend of my dad who worked in finance also came to visit us. He was quite talkative and very sociable too. We bond really easily and also ended up talking a topic on the Great Depression. Now here's what's interesting. The Great Depression I was talking with him was different from the topic I had back in my class. We weren't talking about the event itself. Instead, we were talking about how fear and faith influence everything. He told me that when people start to fear, they stop spending and they stop investing, and when that happens, it just makes things worse. So the economy then didn't just fall apart because of numbers. They fall apart because of a collective loss in faith. And these type of events don't just happen in history. It can be found somewhere recent too. And to show that, I want to introduce this one specific person, Elon Musk. Give me a show quick of hand if you know him or are somewhat familiar with the name. Okay, that's quite a bit of you. Well, if you don't know him, maybe these logos up here, SpaceX, Tesla, might help you recall it. Yes, he is the CEO of the infamous SpaceX and Tesla. But today, I'm not here to talk about any of these companies or even about Elon himself. I'm here to talk about none other than his Twitter account, or what people call it X. For a brief context, Elon Musk has around 65.5 million followers on Twitter. I'll say that's a pretty influential number. But his Twitter account isn't just a personal platform. Believe it or not, it can actually move markets. Okay, let me elaborate. In November of 2021, Elon Musk tweeted asking his followers if he should sell 10% of his Tesla stocks. And then what he unintentionally created was a story of transparency. And just like that, people were starting to worry and start selling their stocks. And in just 2 days, in November of 2021, Tesla stock dropped by a staggering 5%. So yeah, just one tweet, one story, and a 5% drop. For that moment, it impacted thousands of decisions, and it became even more important than the company's financials itself. But however, economics don't always have good impacts on markets. They're a very detrimental one too. That's why I want to bring all of you back to the 1990s and introduce something called the dot-com bubble, or what most people refer to as, when the height of the dot-com bubble, they refer to as the dot-com bubble, what people refer to as the dot-com boom. If you don't know what it is, it's a literal meaning in the name itself, a dot-com, a Wi-Fi logo. It's the idea how that these internet-based tech companies are going to be the next huge big thing. And so here's what happened. People start to buy into these ideas and these stories that were told about how internet is the future and how it's going to revolutionize. And so with those stories that they were bought into, they quickly start to invest to. They were investing in a lot of these tech companies, although they weren't wrong. Remember, these investors are investing not based on solid charts or data markets. They're investing solely based on the story they were being told. And that's when a thing called bubble bust occurred. And when that happened, so did the stock market crash. And up to 2002, there were up to $5 trillion of loss in the market. This story taught me something important. It taught me that behavioral economics don't just shape markets, they can also mislead us. And sometimes all we have to do is take a step back and question ourselves, what is the real story here? I'm no expert in economics. I'm not even close to one. I'm just another economics enthusiast. What I've learned is that investing isn't just about economics, it's about psychology too. We people, we like to think we're rational, but really, we're emotional. We're always being influenced by what other people and the stories that were being told around us, and we only like to believe what we like to believe. I saw something like this in my own life too, not in the stock markets, but in something more personal, about my future. For the longest period of time, I was also bought into these usual narratives about this perfect life and perfect grades and what a perfect 17-year-old should be doing. However, and then I realized that I remember I also have the ability to take a step back on my own and re-question my stories. And that's same with economics. When people see a recession incoming, the stories that we accept can actually influence whether we panic or whether we still calm. When we hear about media stories of uncertainty and stories of crisis, we start to panic, we start to become worried. And that makes us to stop spending, and that basically just makes the economy worse. However, again, if there's this shift in the story to a story of recovery, a story of resilience, then we act differently again. We start to spend again, and then hence the economy stabilizes. And it's not just in the markets, it's in everyday life too. These social media's influencers knows exactly that if they tell the right story, that their followers are going to buy into it, and they're going to support them and buy the products they promote. Yes, that is marketing, but it's also economics. Even personal finances, it's all influenced by what you choose to believe in. If you believe that saving is pointless, you're probably just not going to do it. Again, but if you change this idea and this perspective of thinking that small changes and small savings that you're doing right now might impact you greater later in your life, then you're probably going to start saving too. So again, I'm not a person who spent hours just looking at stock market charts, but I think I'm starting to finally realize why my papa find those stocks and numbers really interesting. Because behind every numbers, there is a story. And whether we realize it or not, we are all a part of shaping that story. So the question I want to leave with you all today is, what is the story you are going to tell? Thank you.